Hello. As we're about halfway through this nursing research course, I know a number of you have been struggling with some of the concepts. So I thought that it might be useful to give an overview of the research process. This PowerPoint is something that I found on the internet that another faculty member had provided, and I thought it was quite relevant. Unfortunately, the name does not appear, so I don't know who to give the credit to for such. But the research process, it has five phases. It has the conceptual phase, the design and planning phase, the empirical phase, the analytic phase, and the dissemination phase. Now, in the conceptual phase, that's where you begin formulating and delineating the problem. So you begin with a topic, you have a research problem, then you have your problem statement, which articulates the problem to be addressed and indicates the need for the study, followed by your research questions, and they are specific inquiries which the researcher wants to answer in addressing the research problem, and that then leads to the research hypothesis, which are the predictions that are going to be tested empirically. And there could be the null hypothesis, which means X does not cause Y, or the alternative hypothesis where X causes Y. So these are just some examples here of a research problem. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time going over them due to the limited time I have on this video recording. But you can look at the slide to get a better understanding. So in the conceptual framework, you have to really evaluate the research problem. So what is the significance of the problem? The research problem should have the potential of contributing meaningful to the nursing knowledge. It should be the problem should be researchable. You have to consider the time and timing, how long it's going to take you to do it, the availability of your participants, any facilities and equipment that might be necessary, and of course a big issue is this funding or the money involved in conducting the research. And lastly, of course, is the experience and interest of the researcher. More seasoned people seek money perhaps from the National Institute of Health, whereas many faculty members are simply using seed money grants from their university. So the next piece then is reviewing the literature. And I know you've done some homework assignments around this area, but it's done to familiarize the researcher with the knowledge base. And basically, it is what is known and not known regarding the topic. If it's a replication of a study, that would be something you need to report, and the identification of relevant theoretical and conceptual frameworks. And of course, the review of the literature can assist with the interpretation of the study findings and developing implications and recommendations. Now, the sources of literature, which we've discussed, are primary sources, which is the gold standard, if you will, which are other research studies and reports published in peer-reviewed journals. And then secondary sources, which are books and literature reviews, summaries, etc. Just as a side note on books, books that are typically published by the major literary groups are all peer-reviewed, and so there's some degree of confidence with that. The ones that are solely, or just a couple authors have a higher review status, if you will, in terms of integrity of information versus those that are edited versions. So the next is the design and planning phase, and that's really where you have to decide on your research design, identify the population to be studied, your sampling plan, then methods to measure the research variables, and finalizing the research study. And in this current week, I know you're working on your sampling size for some of you, and you've also talked to some degree about the research design. I'm sorry, the literature review. So the research design is based on time frame that you have in order to accomplish it. Because if you're going to look at a a intervention trial that may be over a number of years. That's one issue versus a very short training time frame that you might find on the doctoral program. You have to also have a decision about how much control needs to be over the independent variables. And then, of course, the measurement of the independent and dependent variables. And this gives you an example on this slide of a cross-sectional design. And I won't go into it again for the sake of time, but take a look at that. And then the longitudinal and trend studies, again, each have unique characteristics in regards to the design, the experimental, the quasi-experimental, and the non-experimental design. So these are all pretty much the type of designs that we have available in nursing research. And then this is just kind of a flow chart, which I thought was nicely done. You know, it's really kind of a decision tree. If it's a yes, no, and you can see how you go through that decision tree in terms of making a decision about what type of design to be used. And then the measurement of the independent and dependent variables. Retrospectively, the study begins with the dependent variable and it looks backwards for cause. While as a prospective study begins with the independent variable and looks forward to the effect. And there's a couple examples there provided for you to look at. You clearly have to identify the population, and it's in aggregate or total or totality for those that are confirming to a set of specifications. That's your inclusion criteria. So it could be nurses, students, children, etc., whatever. Then your sampling, which is also a subset of the population. Typically, you have two options: a probability sample. This is driven in part by your research design, and then the non-probability sampling, which is not as rigorous in terms of its ability to help with generalization of findings. The methods to measure the research variables, the different methods of data collection. There could be the biophysiological measurements, you know, like blood pressure and temperature, that kind of thing. Self-reports, observation, or in a research instrument, such as most commonly used is in terms of questionnaires and survey forms. Finalizing the research plan, then you need to do a pre-testing of your questionnaire, and then you need to conduct a pilot study to make sure it's going to work. So in the empirical phase then is the data collection and data encoding. And then that is followed by your data analysis, which is your statistical analysis, and data interpretation is really where you're looking at your results in the study. It's the process of making sense of the results and examining their implications. Many places the analysis then follows with the results are kind of combined, and then you have the discussion phase of the publication where you then have the interpretation of the data, and then of course your conclusions and recommendations. You would also have your limitations that would be mentioned in this particular area as well. So the research report, there's various ways that the information is shared. It could be a research abstract. It could be research published, as I mentioned, in peer-reviewed journals, or it could be student research. And as I should make a note that almost all research, there's very few exceptions, has to also have institutional review board approval for protection of human subjects. So that's always a part of that approval process. And in most cases, there are also, depending on the type of research, a consent is required, and the consent has to also be reviewed for appropriateness and to ensure that the language is appropriate for the particular audience that will be asked to sign it. And then, of course, you do the report, then it's the utilization of the findings, and then nursing would be the application to nursing practice and education. So with that said, hopefully you found this useful process, and again, I will make these PowerPoints to you. I encourage you to continue to read and find other resources as you begin, and continue to do your analysis on your assignments and your final projects.